when you're in Switzerland,
Yeah.
you said the head of the World Economic Forum rocked up
Yeah.
and spoke to you all.
Yes.
I think a lot of people, when, I don't know, maybe I'm online too much, but when they talk about the World Economic Forum, it's like, all right, all these global elites are converging on this mountainous state where they're hiding from the world.
Yes.
And they talk about how they're going to run the economy and drive us into the ground.
Yes.
What's your take on that? And did he
give off conspiracy theory vibes?
Is QAnon real? You know.
Thanks for asking.
No.
No.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Things. Ooh.
Yeah. Sorry, I was about to go and tell him because he was heckling us. Hello and welcome to you, civic son of a bitch. My name is James Day, part-time journalist, full-time silly duffer. Today I'm coming to you with something I've never done before on camera: a conversation.
Yuck.
This first episode of Big Chats was filmed back in Naarm during that cold month of the year some call Melbourne's Spring of Deception. Despite the sun, it was cold, and in spite of the cold, I managed to sweat. Sweaty boy. But if you can look past the waterworks, I managed to have a pretty good conversation
Pretty good.
with my friend Lucy Skelton. Now, Lucy is someone you might call type A. Ambitious, competitive, a bit of a workaholic, and stressed. You'll soon understand why. She gained national attention in the 2022 Victorian State Election for running as Labor's candidate in the seat of Kew at just 20 years old. And in spite of having zero funding from her party, she nearly managed to beat her opponent, who is the Victorian Liberal Party's new leader, Jess Wilson. Since then, she hasn't missed a beat, from leading delegations of young Australians to international forums to developing Australia's first ever policy library of one-page briefs. I'd go on about her other achievements, but there's far too many to mention. She's 24. Now, the reason I wanted to interview Lucy is because she's part of a new generation of young people in politics who have this crazy little thing called hope. I can't understand it, and frankly, it disturbs me. But I hope you get something out of this big chat. You may find parts of this interview cringe with all the hope and affirmations it provides. But you know what's worse than being cringe? A coward. And regardless of what you think of her politics, Lucy Skelton is not a coward.
Knock, knock. Knock, knock. Knock, knock. Hi there. My name is Lucy Skelton, and I'm one of your candidates running at this election.
From the age of 16, right, I had thought to myself, like, I want to be involved in politics. And I had this idea that I wanted to run young. Now, young in my mind was not 20. That was not the age that was coming to mind.
Right.
Okay. But basically what happened was I got involved in the Labor Party, had then decided to join the Labor Party in 2021. And then I'd been interning for PETA, etc. I knew the federal election was coming up in the first half of 2022. And I was reaching out to many different groups being like, how can I best be involved? Another bit of a fun fact, I then called the ALP National Secretariat. And this is just a good, like an example of put your hat in the ring, why not?
Yeah.
So I called them and I was like, hi, my name's Lucy, XYZ, I would love to be involved or support in some way. And they were like, okay, like, can you send us your resume? And then a few weeks later, and I didn't expect anything from it. I'd done a few other conversations, like I just didn't expect anything to happen. And then a few weeks later, I got called from someone in Albo's office who then said, do you want an interview for like the election period? And I was like, yes, please.
So it's like a job interview sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So then I worked, and then that interview was pretty much successful. And then I worked 6 days a week, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. In the National Secretariat office in Canberra during the 2022 federal election. Yeah. So it was heavily, and I was also studying. I had joined over the summer between 21 and 2022. I had contacted my home branch here, and they were starting to have conversations about the state election at the end of the year and who was going to be the candidate. So I had joined my home branch, and basically they were starting to have these conversations. And I had been fairly actively involved in my community, not in the Labor Party, but just in my community / in Melbourne advocacy circles before this. So I had run an organisation before this, and which had gotten like an okay amount of media attention. I had been in the news for a few other different things that I had been doing. And essentially around that point in time, I got tapped on the shoulder a little bit. And again, Kew is not a seat that Labor ever thought it could win or ever was nothing like that, right?
Yeah.
And often in seats like that, a candidate is almost begged. It's like, please just put your name on the paper.
Yeah.
And I kind of gotten calls, and they were like, hey, we know what we think you'd be a good candidate. Would you consider running? And I was like, hello, do you know that I'm currently 19 and I live in Canberra? But I joined my home branch in Melbourne because I was like, eventually I would want to run and be involved, right? And that kind of just kept on twirling around in my head.
Yeah.
And I ended up deciding that wasn't an opportunity I wanted to let slip by, because on average it takes someone running 3 times to get elected. And I'd already started to be involved in Pathways to Politics programs and Women in Politics programs, so I knew eventually I wanted to run. And I knew that, again, so it takes someone on average 3 times to be elected, running 3 times to be elected. And I was like, if I do my first one now, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And, it'd be an amazing experience. And no one expects me to get elected, but if I run a strong campaign, one, I can try. It was very much I'm not going to go in and be like, I'm never going to win, but it had to be I had to understand that there had to be more goals to it than that.
Yeah.
So for instance, it wasn't just I'm going to run to win. It was I'm going to run to win, but also I'm doing this to normalize the idea of young people in politics. I'm also doing this to normalize the idea of young women in politics, etc. So it had to be more goals than that. But I ended up deciding to run. And then so after the federal election, I then gave up my residential scholarship at the ANU, and then packed up my life in Canberra pretty much, and then moved back home for 6 months, and then took 6 months off uni to run. And then I did. And then I lost by 3,500 votes.
We were on the verge of greatness. We were this close.
Are you crazy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you, but
Yeah.
I think the 2 biggest reasons or things I like to share when people ask me that, because I had a lot of that.
Yeah.
I had a lot of that.
You get a horse and live in the mountains someplace and don't bother anybody. Got a personality like a dead moth.
I think in many ways, maybe the first thing to start with is there's this kind of rhetoric in advocacy spaces more broadly around why do we do what we do? It's a coping mechanism, right? When the world is so scary and there are so many things going on and you can see people hurting, it's a way to be able to say, well, what can I do, and feel really action-oriented. And I think that's really important. So I think I often like to kind of start with that, where it was if I felt as if the world was in a better place right now, I wouldn't have run. The people, even if I didn't know them directly, and I think that's a very important part, but I knew that people were hurting right now in our community, and I wanted to be able to offer something and be able to do something. And at that point in time, I really felt as if that was the best way that I could make an impact and that I could help. And I knew that my dedication to that, I think in many ways, I would have been a great MP if elected. In many ways now, I'm kind of glad I got my 20s. But at the same time, I would have given it everything I had, and my life would have obviously been completely different and amazing in many other ways. You know, you just don't know how things are going to happen. Like something I remember one door knock I did, and you're often kind of this idea when you door knock.
Hang on. We should probably explain what door knocking is,
yeah.
because
if you haven't been door knocked before, so basically in a lot of campaign cycles or election season, or hopefully not just election season, hopefully like
good politicians
around the time,
go and try and
like,
talk to their constituents.
Like often.
Yeah.
However, particularly around election season, it's very common where either a candidate or the sitting MP will go up to people's houses, door knock them, and basically try and have a conversation with them, or their volunteers will do that. So as part of my campaign, we knocked on 10,000 doors.
10,000?
Yeah.
Over how many months?
Maybe 4 months. I actually can't remember.
Oh
now.
my God. Okay.
Yeah, 4 or 5 months maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah, we knocked on a lot of doors. And a lot of doors.
Yeah.
I had this one conversation with someone, and often the idea with door knocking is like, you're kind of looking for this sweet spot of undecided, right? Because if you knock on someone's door and they're like, oh my goodness, I love you, I'm so excited, like you've got my vote, there's too many people to door knock to be able to spend a lot of time. You go, thank you so much, I'd love to talk to you more later, I better move on to the next house.
Yeah.
And if someone's like, you knock on the door and they're like, I hate you, go away, no worries, have a great day, goodbye. And that's no problem, right?
Yeah.
They're allowed to do that. I've knocked on their door.
Yeah.
But you're kind of looking for this sweet spot of like, hi, like, who are you?
Yeah.
And they might be interested in having a bit of a chat.
Yeah.
But I knocked on this one person's door, and they were probably like in this end stage of like, go away, but also kind of like, maybe not.
Yeah.
And she was kind of like, I don't trust any politicians. I don't, why would I want to be involved? Like, et cetera, et cetera. And I think there's so many people feel that way, and I think it's very understandable in so many ways. But basically, the thing that I said to her at that time was, I understand why you feel that way, but I think something about, at the time, I'm 20 years old. I wouldn't be here unless I deeply cared and wanted to do something. And this is my way of doing that. And we had a longer conversation about what she cared about and what the different policies at the time and kind of this theory of change. And by the end of the conversation, we had organised for her to put a sign on her fence.
That's huge.
Which was huge.
Yeah.
To go from someone who was like completely disengaged, didn't want to have a bar of it, to like, okay, I believe you. And I think there's something potentially very special about looking into someone's eyes and being able to be like, you're not here, because I think there's a lot of this idea that if you're a politician, you're doing it to get rich, or you're doing it just for power. And I don't think we need, like when people say like, oh, you're just doing it for power, I think the next most important question is, why do you want that power? Because I don't think it's necessarily a horrible thing to want power. I think you have to, but what is, when it becomes questionable, is why do you want it?
Yeah. What did you learn from being part of the election machine?
What did I learn? Most of it was probably community sentiments, campaign strategy, and party mechanics, as well as like just connections and community. Like, I think once you've been a candidate or been heavily involved in a campaign, you can't walk around your community in the same way, because you're walking around, every time you see a letterbox, you're like, oh, that would be a really good spot for a sign. Like, you can't. And my campaign was like almost completely run by young people as well. So it was very much, and people that necessarily, so my campaign manager, they were involved in Labor and they got involved and they were absolutely amazing, Sam. But most of the people were just friends of mine who knew me and were like, we got your back, like we'll turn up. So I had no party funding.
None,
which is very common in seats
like that,
aren't,
yeah.
like that. Which is very common. So I had no party funding. I think we ended up having around 10 grand. The Teal candidate had around 250,000, and then we don't know how much the Liberal had.
Where did this money come from then? Like, was it just donations?
Donating, yeah, and fundraising events we ran. Yeah, so to still come second in that context was great. Unique experience that I had was because I was a candidate. I was invited to the Greek seniors luncheon.
You probably met my papu.
That was not a typical crowd for me, but because I was a candidate, I got to go, and like they were feeding me and we danced. It was the best, and it was like I never ever would have been in a space like that any other way.
One of the main criticisms, I guess, by the older generations that's levied at younger people, especially when they start getting involved in politics, is what do you have to say about it? You don't have any life experience.
Yeah.
How could you possibly contribute? Why don't you go get a real job and then come back here and then start telling us how we should be doing things?
Yeah, I hate that rhetoric.
Rhetoric.
Yeah.
I don't hate a lot, but that rhetoric.
Rhetoric.
I think it's very uninformed, and the reason I think that is because I think we have a lot to give, and I think there has to be this balance. And I think something that I really like, or this metaphor, I think around Parliament. Stick with me. Okay, you're going to laugh, and I'm going to accept it. Is thinking of Parliament in its best form as a team.
It's time to slam now.
And what I mean by that is that you need lots of different perspectives and people to be involved, right? If we only had Parliament as just white old men who had lots of experience, that's a terrible Parliament, right? You need a diverse Parliament with many ranges of lived experience and people that can bring things. Those people in those rooms that aren't there, they're not going to be able to tell you what COVID was like as a young person, or what it's like to grow up in an age with the kind of technology that we have now, or access to things that we have now, or the issues that face young people. There's one thing about being able to communicate and say, this is how I feel as a young person. Very different if you've got someone who's actually a young person now. And I think that's a really big part of it. But I think it's also our ability to contribute and in the enthusiasm. We haven't seen necessarily firsthand what hasn't worked before, but we can bring enthusiasm and be able to bring energy that a lot of people from older generations do recognize and see and appreciate the enthusiasm and energy that we bring to things. And if you don't let us into these spaces, how are we expected to kind of learn and bring the skills over time? So I think those are some arguments that you could use among many. My favourite one is that Australia, but specifically South Australia, was the first jurisdiction ever in the world to let women run for office. Do you want to hear the story?
Go on.
Okay, fact check this. So essentially what happened was there was a bill that was coming up to let women the right to vote in South Australia. And one of the politicians who did not want to give women the right to vote put in an amendment forward to make this bill unpassable. Unpassable. He was like, to make this unpassable, I'm going to say that women can also run. So he put forward this bill to say, like, it's laughable.
Speaking on the question the other day to a friend of mine, a supporter of the government, I said that the logical deduction of the whole thing was that they would have lady members of Parliament and the husbands would stop at home to nurse the babies while the ladies did their work in Parliament. Yes, that's what he said. And the reply of my friend was that there would be no babies to nurse. Now, that might be very well from the Malthusian point of view, but it would not fulfill the command God gave to Abraham.
Quite right.
To go forth and let his seed multiply on the earth.
You know, it's so laughable that we would give women the right to vote, but also give them the right to run. But it passed.
when you were in Switzerland,
Yeah.
you said the head of the World Economic Forum rocked up
Yeah.
and spoke to you all.
Yes.
I think a lot of people, when, I don't know, maybe I'm online too much, but when they talk about the World Economic Forum, it's like, all right, all these global elites are converging on this mountainous state where they're hiding from the world.
Yes.
And they talk about how they're going to run the economy and drive us into the ground.
Yes.
What's your take on that? And did he
give off conspiracy theory vibes?
Is QAnon real? You know.
Thanks for asking.
No, that's okay.
No. So basically, I'm part of an initiative called Global Shapers.
Yeah.
Have you heard of it before?
No.
No? So basically what it is, it's an initiative by the World Economic Forum, and basically it's an initiative for young people in almost every major city around the world. So there's over 500 hubs, 508 to be exact, across the world from over 150 countries. Okay. And basically the idea is act local, think global. If we get young people together in each city who are doing actions to be able to help their city and their community be better, then we're going to make the world a little bit better overall. And then we can use the resources of the World Economic Forum and be connected to other cities around the world. Yeah. So I'm the creator of the Canberra Hub, and then each year there's a Global Shapers annual summit where they bring all the different creators from around the world together to kind of meet and learn together before they start their year term as a curator. It really is really interesting because I think across the world, we talk about young people being politically engaged and involved. And I think there's a really interesting conversation about people saying they're not involved, and then we're not looking at the right measures. Like, yeah, we're not traditional measures like, oh, we all read the newspaper. But it's like, that's not what we're doing. We might be engaging on social media or other things. But there is this sense of, especially after COVID, it's really hard to get people to volunteer and get people engaged and involved. And I think a lot of people, like no matter the age, are really at a moment where they're thinking, I don't want to look at the news anymore. Yeah. I need to switch off, either for my mental health or to be able to engage. I can't do this. I don't want to do this. I don't see the point in doing this. Yeah. Like, other people are doing it. They don't need me. Yeah. So I think what's really special is when someone doesn't feel that way. Yeah. When someone says, actually, no, I do need to be involved. We all need to be involved. What can I do? It's not enough to say that I care and then sit back. How can I involve? Even if it's not, it doesn't have to be your full-time job. Yeah. How can I contribute? How can I say something? How can I add impact where it's helpful? So for instance, I met this amazing curator who's now living in the US, but she was born in Afghanistan. And she then moved to the US, and after the Taliban took over, she was then thinking about how can she help young women in her community, because one of the things that wasn't talked about a lot, but we talked a lot about when we were just chatting, was how if you're a woman, you can't leave the house. So then what if you're widowed? And what if you don't have any male relatives who can look after you or send you money? And them and their children could starve to death and have starved to death because they can't leave the house. So for instance, she then talked about the fundraising that she would then do. And because she's got family and connections still there, she's in the best position of potentially in her situation to be able to say, great, we can fundraise here, we can send it back, and then organize scholarships for food and for education to get those kids back to school and for her to be able to live and survive. So each year, the way that COP works is that unless it's a special year, you're basically continuing to pretty much write up a reference document each year where you track like how are things going, what are our agreed goals, and you're building a document pretty much over a few years before it gets to one of the really important years where you then get to decide new things. But pretty much it's just negotiating, debating like what are our goals, how do we not go backwards, because some actors at COP are obviously trying to make us go backwards. Yeah. And be like, fossil fuels are okay. Everyone stop worrying. Like, and then some actors are obviously like the Pacific Islands, like for example, are like, we're going to go underwater.
I mean, one of the strange things I saw about Azerbaijan is that it is credited as like the birthplace of the global oil industry. Was that kind of
evident? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the buildings there are ridiculous.
On the way from the airport to COP, we saw rigs. Like, you could see the infrastructure there. There was like, I think at one point, a COP29 sign in front of fossil fuel infrastructure. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
It's easy to see the
it's
hypocrisy.
it was
Yeah.
very easy to see it. And there was a lot of groups saying like boycott Azerbaijan, and there are many reasons to do that.
Yeah.
But I think the reason that we wanted to still engage and involve was this summit was going to happen either way. And did we want young people in the room? Did we want young Australians in the room who were going to be part of that? And the answer was yes. And I think that kind of comes into a lot of systems that aren't perfect and don't necessarily represent our interests, is what space do we need to occupy, and is it better for us to be in it than not be in it?
What do you think of the cynicism that revolves around that event? Because I think there is a lot.
There is
especially, I mean, as we spoke before, all the doom scrolling, it definitely makes you feel like it's already too late.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing left to save. We're already going down the sinkhole. What's the point of even meeting together and trying to negotiate a way to a better future?
Yeah. I think the two things that come to mind for me initially is that, one, it's really important to note where we're at and not to hide it. We are in a very bad position in many ways, right, as a globe. And to ignore that is to suppress the truth in reality, right? You've got to be able to acknowledge this is where we are, it's not a good position, etc., right? And that's part of the doom aspect of it. But at the same point, are you willing to accept that that's what it's going to be? Are you like, great, okay, too late, I'm going to sit here, right? And if you're not willing to do that, if you want to try, and try not just in this forum, because this is a very important forum that helps us not backslide in many ways, and I think that's one of the most important functions about it. But what else can we do? It's not the only thing that we're doing. It's not the only way to be involved. And if you're not willing to accept that that's the situation, then that kind of dialogue is just not helpful in many ways to getting us where we need to be.
Yeah.
We can acknowledge our position, but then the conversation needs to shift to, okay, what are we going to do if that doesn't work?
Yeah.
And if COP isn't the way that you want to be engaged or involved, more than understandable, what do we need to do instead? How do we, pressure our own government officials? How can we be involved on the international level, etc.? There's lots of different theories around that, but more broadly, this is going to sound really cringe, just don't give up. I've accepted my cringe. I joined the Labor Party when I was 19.
Right.
Yeah, so I joined the Labor Party when I moved up to Canberra and at the ANU. So initially before that, I did work experience in Adam Bandt's office. I consider myself a highly progressive person.
Yeah.
In high school, I was obviously drawn towards the Greens. I did work experience in Adam Bandt's office. But I also knew that I was in a inner city lefty greenie bubble.
Yeah.
Like I knew that I was. And I was very happy in it. Like I was like, like my morals, wonderful.
Yeah.
But I knew that I was in a bubble and I hadn't been exposed or engaged with a lot of other ideas. So when I moved up to Canberra, I had this idea that I wanted to engage more broadly, not because I thought I was going to be necessarily convinced, but I just wanted to be able to hear from the people directly what they were saying instead of it filtered down through many people. And I attended a Labor event, and basically at the ANU, very commonly, and I feel like this would probably be a whole other episode, there are factions. So there was a left group and a right group, and I went to both initially because, again, I just wanted to learn as much as I could, and I ended up joining the left group. And I think the other thing about being in Canberra specifically was obviously you're very close to federal parliament. Like, for instance, I remember going to an event at some point in my first year, and I had been involved in climate spaces very actively, again, since 2015, so when I was like 12, 13. And I remember seeing Chris Bowen at one of these events, and I was like, I've been trying to contact you for so long, right? And then suddenly he was standing in front of me, and I was like, what is this access? Went to another event and Peta Murphy was there. So if anyone hasn't heard of Peta Murphy, she was an amazing MP. She was the MP for Dunkley. She unfortunately passed away, I think 2 years ago now.
I remember when I was in Parliament and they gave the testimony.
Yeah.
She passed from cancer. And
If you have heard of her, you would have heard of her. She was the one that put in the gambling inquiry to say no more gambling ads, among many other things. So very respected, a woman with incredible integrity, really just showed me what it could look like to be an amazing local MP and someone who really fights and stands for what she believes in. Like it was very integral. So she said, she was on the other side of the room and she was like, oh, if anyone's interested in like volunteering or interning in my office when I'm up during sitting weeks, like just let me know. And you wouldn't believe how quickly I rounded that room. So I started volunteering in her office. So whenever she would come up for a sitting week, I would go into her office and then just try and help out as much as I could. And for instance, opportunities like that were in her office specifically. Sometimes they would be like, oh, we've got a short speech coming up. Do you have any ideas of what you might want it to be on? And I would be like, climate change. But et cetera, that kind of access. And she was doing a speech in that year about how the universe, like humanities degrees especially, had like doubled cost from a Morrison government decision. And I had been given one of the speeches and I thought I was just like looking at it, noting it. I did not know it was the actual copy that was going to be handed to her. Anyway, first initial makeup, we all make them. And I had like written over it, like, so for instance, in the speech, it was like, this is happening to young people, like this is the harmful effects, et cetera, et cetera. And I had like circle bits and being like, that's me, like, because like, again, I didn't know it was going to her. Yeah. And then when she actually did her speech, she had been given that note and she actually used my notes from it to say like, I've got this volunteer in my office, like Lucy Skelton, and everyone be able to like, you know, ... And it was like, Lucy, it's like getting close to 5. Do you want to go home? And I said to her, I was like, Peter, if I could sleep here, I would.
And the people that are affected are real people. So before I conclude my remarks, I just want to give this example. I have this truly amazing young woman volunteering in my office at the moment in Parliament House, Lucy Skelton, who's a first-year student at ANU studying public policy and other things, and told me today that if she could basically live in Parliament House, she would, because it's so exciting for her to be here and to be part of all of this. And she helped to put together some notes for this speech. Sorry, Lucy, I always ad-lib and don't use all the notes that are given to me. But Lucy put together these notes, and one of the things she did was go through the member for Barton's speech to highlight some of the issues. And I think she accidentally, in the papers she gave me part of what she'd marked up. Because the sentence of the member for Barton's speech that says, think about the year 12s who had a hell of a final year last year with COVID, Lucy'd written on it, that's me. You know, that one sentence resonated with her so much, she wrote on it, that's me. And she's lucky enough, she's at university, she's doing all she can to live her dream. I want everyone to have Lucy's opportunities. I want everyone in my electorate to be able to dream Lucy's dreams and be able to come here to Parliament and sleep here if they could, as Lucy puts it.
Her and her office were just transformative, and I would not be where I am without them. Very, very easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So FORE is a non-partisan social enterprise. But what we do, we work with activists and NGOs from across the country to be able to share the solutions that they've been able to identify for their communities with government officials and parliamentarians.
Right.
And the way that we do this is by hosting a policy library of one-page briefs online. A lot of people who haven't been involved in politics or policy before, it feels a little bit unintuitive initially about, well, what's the point of that? Why one page? Why do all these things? And I think the way that I best like to describe it is with a little story, if you will. So I've also been a staffer during that time as well. So staffer, for anyone who hasn't heard the term, is basically you work in a political office for an MP. Yeah. Right now, on a politician's desk, as you'd know, is a 70-page report. In that 70-page report, there is a solution to a wicked problem. something that could really help the community. The authors have spent months, if not years, meticulously writing and reviewing it. And they're confident that if this happened, we could solve that problem. However, it probably hasn't been read and it probably won't be. Not because the politician wouldn't like what they saw or they wouldn't be interested if they saw it or their team, but because simply the office doesn't have time to trawl through every single report they get given. And the people who wrote it might not have the skills to be able to get it noticed or to help them understand it. So the solution sits there with nothing happening for the reason that it hasn't gotten noticed and no one's had the opportunity to understand it yet.
Yeah.
And this is a very common problem. So pretty much any MP we have spoken to, so we did our federal parliamentary launch towards the end of 2024, and pretty much any MP and a lot of advisors that we've spoken to have just said, like, we need this. Because sometimes things don't happen because of many different reasons, but sometimes it's not ill will. Sometimes it's not, okay, well, we're not going to look at this or we're not going to be interested. It's simply there's just too much. There's too much to trawl through. And often these kind of policy skills and how to make them actionable isn't as common as you'd hope. So for instance, a lot of conversations we have with different groups might be, they'll say, okay, we want to have stronger environmental policy. And we'll say, great, what do you mean? Are we doing something to the EPBC Act? Are we doing something, we're adding a trigger? Like, what legislatively are we doing? How do we physically implement this? If I was a public servant and I got told to make the environment stronger, what does that mean? What does that look like? Yeah. And it's actually...
Fertilizer.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's actually less common than you would hope, really, to kind of get those actionable statements. Because a lot of the time, the groups know them, but in these documents, the value or the point in it is just to be able to say, just to convince them on the merit of a broader idea. But often what politicians need is the kind of the details. Not, you can have a much longer brief on what the details actually look like, but they need the specifics on what the idea is. So what we do is we talk to, again, activists and NGOs, and either to help make their ideas or to help action their ideas. So either we have a conversation, if sometimes they already present it, and there's sometimes just one way to do that. So for instance, if they say raise the age of criminal responsibility, that's a fairly straightforward ask. So even if they haven't said amend this act in this way to do this, there's a very straightforward, okay, if we were to do this, you have to do it in this way. Sometimes it's more like, okay, we want to do this, and it's like, oh, well, we could do that in a few ways. And we have to have a conversation with them to say, well, which way would you prefer? So that way when we write it and put together the brief, it's accurate to their intentions. But it's very common within political offices and ministerial offices and in the public service more broadly to be able to ask for, I need 1 page on this. And the point of the 1 page isn't so they read it and they go, okay, great, $1 million. The point of the brief is to just get them interested. And it's to help them decide, am I interested in this or am I not? And if they're not interested in it, great, save time, put it to the side. If they are interested, then they'll go read the full brief. So basically the role for us is if we make a library of 1-page briefs where we reread the 70-page reports, we look to all these different ideas, then hopefully if they like the idea, it gets them interested enough to then go read the full report when they might not have otherwise. Yeah, I think a lot of people, good politicians, but I think a lot of people don't know what a day in the life looks like for a politician and how much work they actually do and what that actually looks like. But any politician I know is pretty much working from the moment they get up to the moment they fall asleep, unless they really advocate for time with their family. It's not a role with a whole lot of work-life balance.
No, you're a public servant.
Yeah, you are.
And people expect you to commit and deliver.
Yeah.
You've run a whole election campaign talking to all these people. They have their trust imbued in you.
And that's a privilege. You have to do that. There was, I've forgotten the show's name, but I feel like you might know it or remember it.
Think of it?
Yeah, I think so. And it was the only time the people are going to be happy with you is if you're kind of like if you're a politician, you can't have a nice chair in a nice office. You need to be sad and wet in a cave.
Oh, your chair?
Oh, God, yeah. It's cool, isn't it? It's got lumbar support.
Bennett. People don't like their politicians to be comfortable. They don't like you having expenses. They don't like you being paid. They'd rather you lived in a f***ing cave.
Okay, fine. So what should I be sitting on? Should I just get an upturned KFC bucket?
It's a f***ing normal chair, right? Not a f***ing massive vibrating throne.
But also it's understandable why people think that, because I think political literacy and teaching of politics is sadly not very well done in Australia, in my opinion. I don't blame people for not knowing it because when they were never taught it. Like, I was never taught it, you know, like, I think there was an element, like a vehement hatred and dislike of the major parties when I moved up there. And I think a lot of that in many ways is very warranted. But I think there was a lot that I didn't know until I got to know people and started to make connections and build friendships, etc. And again, hate to say it, realize they were human. There are restraints that are placed on politicians, and especially if you are in a major party, one of the things that you do give up is your ability to say whatever you want, whenever you want, so that you can get access to rooms and spaces where you feel like you can make a bigger difference. So it's the sacrifice of not being able to say that in public, but being able to advocate for your interests in the party room, for instance. But no, they the people that I've worked for are just give me so much hope in so many ways. And I feel like by getting to know people involved in politics, not always are going to be the best experience. I'm not saying everyone's great, but find the right people and they give you hope and they'll keep you moving forward.
I think that's a good place to end it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you, James.
Shake your hand.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.